250,000 jobs could be lost when JobKeeper ends. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, let's have a look at this article from news.com.au. Up to 250,000 jobs could be lost as JobKeeper ends, and this is an article written by Frank Chung from news.com. Now, if we jump here, we can see just how many total applicants there were for JobKeeper. In August, there were 962,000. Now, what really shocked me when I was making these charts was this one here, and I've mentioned it several times. It's just the percentage of employed people in each state on JobKeeper. 6.84% in Queensland of employed people were being supported by JobKeeper. How many of these businesses are zombie companies that maybe are just kicking the can down the road? Now, I mean, we can look here, look at Victoria, not surprising. NT, not too bad. And, you know, WA as well, and yeah, good old New South Wales. But what combined with this other concern, the insolvency cliff that we're about to experience. So here we have the the number of personal insolvencies, and this is compared to the same time last year from 2020 to 2019, and we can see that we are about half of where they should be. Northern Territory is at 0. I think ACT is close to that, but generally half. And you can see here, this is the trend in personal insolvencies going down. Orange is construction. Then you've got retail down here, and you've also got healthcare. So they're all doing much lower than where they are normally. You consider this red line here about the average. And you might be thinking, Florian, that's a good thing. We don't want people to go insolvent. Okay, I understand, but it's always going to happen, okay? You just make bad mistakes, you get unlucky. You know, it's life. It's a part of life. You've got to deal with it. So my concern is, what about all this change, this difference? Times aren't getting good, guys. We've just had our first recession in 28 years. The government is flooding the economy with money. So how many of these businesses are zombie companies that are being propped up by JobKeeper? How many people, well, these are personal insolvencies. We go down here. It's the same for companies. These are asset companies entering external administration. Look at that. Look at that plunge. Look at that plunge, everyone. It's the exact same thing. It's you're looking at 50%. The only one higher than this time last year was the ACT at 103%. So, I mean, civil servants, you tell me. But we're seeing the number of personal insolvencies, the number of businesses entering external administration, it's about 50% of where it should be. So what I'm scared of and worried about is that you've got some people in business, maybe a small business person, that has just kept the staff on to get them the JobKeeper and kicked the can down the road and hoped, maybe believed all the news and the hype that everything's going fantastic, and not realized that it was just pumped up by artificial money flooding the economy, and they've incurred all of these additional costs. So then you start seeing people losing their houses. You start seeing people having to be on the street because they've incurred all of these other costs when they should have just fired people. That's the harsh reality sometimes of owning a business. You've got to make the tough calls. And maybe JobKeeper is going to end up being a curse instead of a blessing. So let's have a look at this, everyone. Up to 250,000 Aussies could lose their jobs in a wave of business collapses as the JobKeeper ends this month, experts have warned. The federal government will finally pull the plug on its $90 billion wage subsidy scheme on the March 28th, as the Australian economy begins to stand on its own 2 feet after the devastation caused by the lockdowns. But a leading labour market economist warns, with the withdrawal of the wage subsidy, will wipe out thousands of businesses that until now have been kept afloat by the scheme. Exactly. Here's the question, everyone. Would you take your own hard-earned money and invest in a business that's losing money? Just to keep it going, just to keep their cash flow going, because that is what is happening here. You know, the government should at least put situations in place so, well, business owners aren't liable for any costs incurred because the government has screwed them over. I'd rather that. I'd rather have a system where all of the entitlements are paid and people keep their houses. My best best guesstimate is that 125 to 250,000 people might lose work when the program finishes at the end of March, Professor Jeff Borland from the University of Melbourne wrote in his labour market snapshot on Wednesday. Professor Borland stresses that forecasting potential JobKeeper job losses is extremely difficult. I suppose that the number of JobKeeper recipients stayed at 1.55 million, the most recent available figures as of December 1. Well, I need to update my chart. That's insane. 1.55 million. The proportion of revenue lost by businesses receiving JobKeeper was 35%, and the number of unviable jobs is a proportion of revenue decreases, he wrote. That would suggest employment losses could be 550,000 people, 500,000. But that number needs to be treated as pretty unlikely upper bound, he said. It doesn't take too much to change for that number to look like my guesstimate based on the ABS Labour Force Survey data. For example, if the average revenue lost by businesses receiving JobKeeper was only 15%, by the end of March it would mean 235,000 persons would lose employment. Professor Borland told News.com, while his analysis was rudimentary, it was an important topic for policy, and there hasn't been much commentary on it. It comes as 9 newspapers notes that based on reviews of Australian Securities and Investment Commission notices, just 3 companies have used the federal government's new insolvency processes designed to help financially struggling but otherwise viable small businesses stay afloat. Now, this is changes to the bankruptcy rules that we have here in Australia. So it looks like we're getting systems in place similar to America, which is good. Hopefully, businesses can be survived, but it's still a nightmare. What's happening here? Here you go. At the Fortitude Valley Centrelink, guys. I tell you, I am very happy that I don't have a front-facing, consumer-facing retail business where you've got to shop. You'd hate to be in that situation. Credit Watch Chief Executive Patrick Coughlin told news.com.au that based on historical insolvency trends, comparing the number that took place in 2020 versus 2019, there would likely be at least 3,000 to 4,000 businesses that go under after March. Last year, 4,943 companies entered administration, or about half the normal number. There will definitely be a shock come the end of JobKeeper, he said, but added he did not think it will be a tsunami of insolvencies originally predicted at the start of the pandemic. This is definitely going to be a bit of a reset, given there were thousands of companies that didn't go into administration and would have in a standard year, exactly. The 3,000 to 4,000 is just companies that go into administration in a normal year. I think that there are going to be COVID-infected administrations on top of that. But Mr. Coughlin said it was difficult to predict what the additional number of purely COVID administrations would be. Well, yeah. He said he was not expecting them all to happen in April. No, it'll be stretched out. People will do everything they can to keep their business going. I still think it will be a gradual increase back to pre-COVID levels, but I think it's a logical conclusion that there were companies that would have gone into administration that haven't, and companies that were affected by the pandemic, he said. Mr. Coughlin said JobKeeper had been a fantastic policy initiative that had saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs, but it was time for it to end. It hadn't saved anything. The jobs are going to disappear. It's just kicking the can down on the road for future generations to pay for it, guys. I'm very hopeful that come April, the economy is in a much better position. Hopefully no lockdowns, people are getting out there, restrictions being eased, and money being spent. If you extend JobKeeper, you start to potentially cause more issues, because there are companies out there that need to be allowed to fail. Yes, that's it. You need creative destruction in a market economy, everyone. What's happened? Are we in a situation now where people are just so mollycoddled that they can't appreciate the fact that we need some adversity in our lives? One unknown factor, Mr. Coughlin said, was how aggressive ASIC and the ATO would be in enforcement. Chris Bakersville, partner at insolvency firm Jerish Sutherland, agreed. The big unknown in all this, the sleeping giant, is the ATO, he said. Well, yeah, ATO are the ones that bankrupt more people than anyone else. It's a rarity when there was another business, we were looking at it, in previous articles, like a loan shark business, pretty much. A payday lender was actually bankrupting more people than the ATO. But ATO number 2! Remember, you've got to pay the government before you get to eat, and you get a home for your kids. That's all. That's what, that's the reality of taxes, guys. Wouldn't it be great if you could write off food? So we're starting to now see creditors filing for winding up companies. We've even saw an ATO wind up, which we got semi-excited about, but it was only one. We've seen 70 companies apply for temporary restructuring relief. Personally, I've had more inquiries in January than I almost did for the entire period of October, November, and December. Mr. Bakersville said the government stimulus had been sweeping. They basically paid for our staff wages. They got reprieve and abatement for our landlords. We've got back our taxes to a certain extent. Creditors practically couldn't sue a director. Yes, that's the thing that I mean, that's tough. If you're a small business and someone's trading while insolvent, you can't do anything about it. The ATO stopped enforcing, and the banks did the same. They just navigated and pushed people through to a new year, he said. Obviously now, there's a rollback period. JobKeeper's rolling back. There's no way we're going to get any more taxes back. Landlords now want their money, and the banks will soon be asking for their money. As for which industries will be affected, Mr. Bakersville predicts insolvencies will start to rise in the exact order they were impacted last year. Personally, I'm currently trading 6 gyms. All of them have got landlord problems, franchisor problems, trying to recover from the pandemic, and they just couldn't get on top of their debts, he said. I think we're starting to see hospitality and food retailers take it a bit of a hit. Indeed, one food retailer last month announced it would be shutting up shop the minute JobKeeper ends. Paul Sidorovsky, owner of Newcastle-based chain Yogurtland, said he would be permanently closing his 11 stores at the end of the month, putting about 200 people out of work. He told the Newcastle Herald the decision was heartbreaking. In spite of the best efforts of all staff, we're no longer able to move forward into the future, with sales being down 30% due to the pandemic, he said. A spokesman for Treasurer Josh Frydenberg referred News.com to his February 24th speech to the Australian Chamber of Commerce. Together with those transitioning off the first phase of the program, this shows that around 2.7 million individuals across around 650,000 businesses have now graduated from JobKeeper, Frydenberg said. As a result, Treasury now expects the number of individuals relying on the payment to be 1.1 million in the March quarter, a reduction of 200,000 compared to the estimate of 1.3. Of the 1.1 million expected to be on JobKeeper in the March quarter, we're expecting the overwhelming majority to remain in their existing job following the conclusion of the program. We'll have to see if that happens. I mean, how many people are on JobKeeper and the instant JobKeeper ends that they're going to burn through all of their accrued holiday time? And then how many businesses are going to get hurt with that? In that speech, the Treasurer noted, this is supported by the Reserve Bank, which is forecasting that the unemployment rate will continue to fall from 6.4% in January to reach 6% by year's end. Treasury has estimated about 100,000 jobs could be lost when JobKeeper ends, but the federal government had previously set record levels of household and business savings amassed during the pandemic would drive the recovery. That's what they're hoping. They're hoping that the huge amount of savings that we have will keep the economy going. But are people going to be breaking their spending habits and not continuing, not spending? Maybe they're all worried about the fact that we've had a recession. Mr. Frydenberg said in January the coalition's economic parachute had ensured Australia avoided an economic catastrophe. The unprecedented economic support provided by the Morrison government during the current crisis means that even as JobKeeper and other temporary emergency measures taper off, a fiscal cliff is avoided, he said. With an additional $200 billion sitting on household and business balance sheets compared to the start of last year, there is a huge sum of money available to be spent across the economy, helping create jobs and maintain the momentum of our economic recovery. Labor had called for JobKeeper to be extended past March, arguing hospitality and tourism were lagging behind other sectors. The big question is whether it will be a soft landing, or if it can simply be kicked down. The can be kicked down the road. Mr. Bakersville notes that during the GFC, it took effectively a full year from the beginning of 2008 to early 2009 before it really hit the fan and the full effects were seen. That's it. What we'll do is we'll bring up the property cancel data room, because there's quite a good demonstration here of the impact of the last recession on commercial property, how it was delayed. We'll look at offices once it loads up. Come on. And we can see here the vacancy rates. Look at that. The recession took years for office vacancies to manifest, and that's across all cities. The only one where it isn't quite as dramatic is good old Canberra. And of course we know that Darwin didn't exist until 2010, you know. So I guess if we've been stimulating the economy right up until March 28, one thought is we pretty much have to wait a year until we see the full effect. I don't think we're going to see the cliff, the tsunami I was predicting. I think the government has stimulated the economy enough to avoid that, but I think we'll see a ramp up potentially towards the end of the year. He added, I just can't help but think we haven't seen the full negative impact of the pandemic. We're still waiting. Yes, I would agree with him there. I think we haven't really felt the impact of this recession, everyone. It hasn't. There's so many zombie businesses, so many businesses that are still in existence that sadly shouldn't be. What do you reckon? Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one in the comments down below. If you're a fan of the channel and enjoy the content I create here, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.